Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Next, let us discuss some of the definitions of learning. Now, as I have been emphasizing repeatedly, we have to learn the definitions and the psychologists who have given those definitions by heart very accurately, very precise. So, the first definition of learning is given by Daniel Bell. According to him, learning is modification due to energies of organisms and environment impinging on the organism itself. So according to him, what is learning? Some modification, some change that will take place in your behavior due to the external energies or the external environment. The external factor are going to act on the human being, on the person, and that will determine how much you have learned. According to Gates, learning again is modification, changing one's behavior through one's experiences. So what all new things we have learned, how has our behavior improved over a period of time because of the past experiences we have had, that means learning. Crow and Crow defined learning as the acquisition of habits, knowledge and attitudes. So how did one acquire the new habits? What all new knowledge and attitude has been added in your, your bag? That is what defines your learning. Gary and Kingsley defined learning as a process by which behavior is originated or changed through the practice of training. So when, by being trained, either a person develops a new behavior altogether, or brings about a change in one's behavior. That is again a part of learning. The next definition of learning is given by Moon. According to this psychologist, learning comparatively is a permanent progressive modification of behavior. Comparatively, it is not entirely permanent. It does not mean that if you've learned something, you are going to continue with it throughout the rest of your life. No. It may be permanent, but there are chances of you forgetting that as well. So this is a special process which results from observation or training. The more you observe, the more you train yourself, the better learning will be. Next is Woodworth. Learning is a change that occurs in the organism during many kinds of activities, and it shows later as an after effect in activities. So Woodworth defined learning as a change that occurred in the organism, that took place in the organism during the activities that one followed and the after effects of those activities. Who's another psychologist, he defined learning as a process which brings about changes in the individual's way of responding as a result of contact with the aspects of environment. So when exposed to some changes in the environment around one, how did a person respond to it? These responses also keep on changing. I may be very aggressive at first, very straightforward. But then I learn to keep myself calm and composed, and therefore my responses are going to be like that. So learning again is all the changes that will take place in your way of responding to the external. Morgan and King defined learning as again a relatively permanent change. So you can see all the psychologists refer to learning as a permanent change, but added the word relatively also. So it is comparatively a permanent change which is brought over in your behavior due to your experience and practice. Bose defined learning as a process by which the individual acquires, gets new habits, knowledge, a new attitude is developed, and so on and so on. Krusenstein defined learning as a relatively enduring change in the potential behavior that results from experience. Again, a change which is relatively powerful and more likely to continue in the future. So those changes in your behavior which are expected to continue in future for a long time because they have come to you because of your experience. This is what Krusenstein defined learning as. And then last but not the least, Barron defined learning as a relatively permanent change again because of your behavior resulting from some experience. So almost all the psychologists have have stated that learning is the outcome of changes in your external environment, and learning is the outcome of practice and experience, and it is relatively permanent in nature. Now, as I told you, we are going to learn about the theories of learning that have been given by four very prominent psychologists. The first such theory of learning was given by Thorndike, Edward Lee Thorndike, and he gave the theory of trial and error. Now, first of all, who was Edward Lee Thorndike? Now, you can expect a question about the psychologist also. So, it is important for you to learn the information given about them. So, we know his entire duration. We know that he was born on 31st of August 1874 and died in 1949, August 9. He was an American psychologist and he spent his entire life, his entire career at the Teachers College in Columbia University. Now his work, the name of his work was Comparative Psychology and Learning Process. This is the book, this is the thesis which he had written. And this theory was related to connectionism. He referred to the importance of some sort of a connection, that will help in the educational psychology as we are going to read about it. He also worked on the ways and means in which one can solve the industrial problems by giving some exams and tests to the employees. He was a member of the board of Psychological Corporation and he served as the president of the American Psychological Association in 1912. A review of the General Psychology Survey, which was published in 2002, was ranked as, that paper ranked Thorndike as the 9th most cited psychologist of the 20th century. So among everybody else across the world, he was the 9th best psychologist. Now, Edward Lee, obviously, since we are talking about Edward Lee Thorndike. So, Thorndike believed that reinforcement has a very big role to play in one's learning process. Reinforcement means the kind of rewards or the kind of techniques that are used to make one realize one's error, to make one understand whether one is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. So he worked on the reinforcement theory. He analyzed at length the behavior of the people and then he came up with his law of effect. We are going to read about that in the coming part of the story, but it was because of his contributions to this behavioral analysis in the field of psychology that actually impacted education to a great extent, and it also had a positive influence in the field of education. Now, what was the trial and error theory? Now, for this, what did he do? Let us first look at this box. You all can see this box. Let me just zoom it a bit. You can see there is a box. There is a cat in the box. Outside the box is food. This food acts as a temptation for the cat. This food is kept so that the cat can be tempted towards the food. It can be attracted towards the food. This is the door of the trap in which the cat is there. And this, as you can see, is the pull string. If you pull down the string, the door will open. The cat will be able to come out and eat the fish. So this is the box which Skinner, Thorndike used in order to validate his trial and error theory. Now let us read about the trial and error theory. It was important for me to show you what box am I going to talk about before we learn about this theory. So, yes. So as we know, what did he do? He placed a cat in a puzzle box. The puzzle box had a lever. Pulling it will release the door. Outside the door was a fish which was attracting the cat towards it. Now this cat inside the puzzle, box made multiple trials. Obviously the cat is inside the box. The cat can see fish outside the box and therefore the cat wants to go out so that it can eat the fish. So there were multiple things and multiple trials, multiple efforts which were made by the cat so that it could release itself from the box. First, what happened? There were all the random movements. The cat must have tried to scratch with the help of claws, must have even made some sounds, tried to move here and there. And in those random movements, coincidentally, the cat would have pulled down the lever. The moment the lever would have been pulled down, the cat saw the door being opened, going out and getting the fish. Now the cat understood progressively, gradually, after multiple attempts, that on pulling down the lever, the door will open and the cat will get a chance to go out and eat the fish. So this the cat learned after making trials and errors. There were many efforts, multiple trials made by the cat, multiple times the cat would have failed, but finally the cat achieved what it wanted, the fish lying out. So this is what Thorndike talked about. He said that learning will always take place when there is a motive. For the cat, the motive to open the door was to eat the fish. So when you give a motive to a child, the child will always learn. An organism, a person will make multiple responses, will make multiple trials, will make multiple efforts to get something, to achieve something in life. Here, the cat must have clawed, scratched, walked, as I told you, must have created sounds and all this. Then Thorndike said that all these responses which one makes, all these efforts which one makes, are going to lead one to the goal. Right? The cat did a lot of things and one of those things, that is pulling down the lever, made the cat come out of the box and eat the fish. So those responses which help us, get what we want, which help us get our goal, are satisfying responses. And those responses, those efforts which went in vain, which were totally useless, waste, and did not help us achieve anything, those responses are known as the annoying responses. So this is how we classify. Satisfying responses which help us get our, complete our goal, which help us achieve something, they obviously make sure that you are able to learn better. We know that if we are going to perform, we are going to reach to our goal. We are going to get to that fish which is waiting for us outside. And therefore, satisfied responses are learned better and are learned quicker as compared to the annoying responses. And annoying responses, when we know something is not going to help us achieve what we want in life, we are going to eliminate them. We are going to forgo them. We are going to discard them from our life. So this is what Thorndike's theory talks about. Now from these observations, Thorndike was able to get some generalized statements, some general laws he was able to make. First, the connection, the association between the stimuli and the response. What is a stimuli? The thing which will lead you to react in some particular manner is your stimuli. Here, the fish which was offered to the cat was the stimuli. And what was the response of being offered the fish? The opening of the lever, so that the door will be opened and the cat will go out. This was the response of the cat. So we offered the cat a stimuli and the cat responded to it by opening the lever. Now he came up with a few laws in order to prove, in order to validate his theory, his learning process. The first is the law of readiness. Readiness means willingness. It means that when the things are connected, one can always expect a satisfactory result to take place. For example, if I talk about the fish and the cat only, the cat learned to pull down the lever quickly because the fish offered to the cat as a stimuli was very attractive and fascinating, and the cat wanted it. There was a connection between the two. Therefore, the learning was quick. On the other hand, let's say I am keeping a teddy bear out of that, that cage, that particular box. The cat would have not wanted, maybe out of curiosity, the cat would have wanted to pull down the lever, go out. But after having checked what it was all about, I'm sure the cat would not have opened the lever again because it would have understood what the stimuli was. So learning will always take place. The stimuli will always respond in a satisfactory manner if there is a connection between a stimuli as well as the response. This is the law of readiness. So, as I told you, again, it is something that prepares you or it impacts how you are going to behave in some situation. If a child is ready to learn, if a child wants to learn, because let's say the topic that is being taught to him is something which interests him. So the child, out of curiosity, would want to know more about it. On the other hand, if a child is given some topic which is obviously not suitable, which is not fascinating for him or her, the rate of learning is going to slow. So the connection between the two is very important. The next is the law of effect. Now this says that if some exercise is repeated and after repetition you get a positive outcome from it, the bond between the stimuli and the response becomes stronger. Let's say a child comes to the class and he gets to know that there is no teaching that will take place, but an online quiz will be played by the teacher. Initially, the child was very lazy, uninterested in the test, but then he started answering the questions and he got a beautiful interface of the quiz. He got marked and he started gaining scores. What happened? He started taking interest in it. He could see a positive outcome of it, and therefore the connection, the bond between the child and that quiz got strong. Now, this law of effect has got two parts. It is the law of use and the law of disuse. Now, what do they mean? The law of use means that if somebody gets the desired outcome from what one is practicing, the bond strengthens. The law of disuse means that if that bond is getting weak, that is, if the child is not interested in that quiz also, is not interested at all in all the questions put up on the screen, what will happen? The child will continue coming to the class. So if the connection is strong, you have the motivation to proceed further and to achieve something. And if the connection is weak, you are going to discontinue using this. But after the year 1930, Thorndike discarded the law of use and disuse. Okay, so that was only until 1930. Later on, he discarded both these laws. The next law that Thorndike talked about was the law of excess. Now, what does it mean? It says that whatever efforts we made in order to achieve our goal, it's stamped in a connection. Stamped in means it again strengthened the bond or the connection between the stimuli as well as the response. Now, when you have a satisfactory response, when you have a satisfactory result at the end of something that you are doing, when you get a reward at the end of something that you are doing, you stamp in that. You consider that to be of your interest and you take a keen, interest and show enthusiasm and motivation in practicing. Now, Thorndike conducted, in order to validate this law of exercise, he actually talked about the importance of reward and incentives. If you give good rewards, if you give good incentives to the employee would always want to come to the office regularly, would put in the best of his or her efforts to show a good outcome. On the other hand, if the incentives are very unpleasant, they are not good, if you are going to, let's say, punish the employee, scold the employee, deduct the salary of the employee for whatever error, whatever mistake they have made, their strength, their connection with the work you have allotted to them is going to get weaker and weaker, and thereby is it going to reduce their keenness to work. So a positive reward, a positive incentive plays a very important role in order to ensure that the work allotted to somebody is done with motivation and focus. The next law that he talked about was the law of multiple response or varied reaction. What does this law mean? This law means that if a person, if a child, if a grown-up, if an animal is exposed to a situation which is new to them, they are going to try multiple things before reaching that one way in which they can come out of that situation. Yes, there are so many things that the person would try, the animal would try, until he or she or it learns the most appropriate way of it, and only then he is going to apply that. So multiple responses, multiple efforts, multiple trials will be made by one first before reaching the response that gives you the maximum satisfaction. Next is the law of attitude. What does the law of attitude mean now? Law of attitude means that you will be able to learn something only if you have the correct attitude. If you get into some task with an intention to learn something new, you will certainly end up learning. But if you are doing something just for the sake of it, just because you've been assigned that task and you want to get through with it at the earliest, you will not be able to get any benefit out of it. A child, let's say, is sent to the playground and told to play cricket for an hour and then come back home with one technique of cricket that he has learned. That child who would be very much interested in cricket and will try and learn it with a good attitude will certainly learn not one but many techniques. But somebody who's just born with the attitude that, the parents have told me to go and for an hour I have to play, the child will return back home empty. So your attitude matters the most in what and how you have learned something. Then we have the law of analogy. Now what does it mean? Analogy means comparison. We get the analogous questions also in our exams, right? This means that when a person comes across a new situation, obviously, he is going to compare if in case in the past also that person has been through a similar situation. Okay? Let's say I was driving my car and my car had a punctured tire in the middle of the road. I did not know what to do. But then I recollected a time when my brother had changed the tire in front of me. Keeping that in mind, I took out all the tools and I ended up doing it myself. How was I able to do it? I was able to do because of the learning that I inculcated in myself based on a similar situation previously. This is the law of analogy. And the last law that he came up with was the law of associative shifting. As the name suggests, associative shifting. When your preferences, your responses shift from one to another because of the better incentives that were probably offered to you in the second situation. Let's say a man was working in a shoe factory, was getting a handsome salary, who had a beautiful cabin of himself, had good food that was given to him during the day. He never wanted to leave his job. Suddenly, he got a job offer to work in, let's say, a biscuit factory. Here, the incentives were higher. His salary was high, his perks were better and everything. And the shifting that he did from shoe factory to the biscuit factory was because of the better reward incentives that were offered to him in the second place. So it is not important that if we have a good connection with something, the law has focused that if the connection between a stimuli and response is strong, then that means they are going to be together. No. There can be a change in this, if there is a new response, the response will change if the stimuli changes because of a better incentive. So this was the law of associative shift. Now we know what is the law of Thorndike, the trial and error. How is this important in the education field? How does this help in the field of education? First, Thorndike advocated that the child, the teacher, has to ensure that the child is motivated to learn before she starts to teach the child. Only when the child would be motivated to learn something new, the topic is going to fascinate the child, the learning is going to be powerful, better and quick. The teacher may use some preparatory exercises, some pre-reading tasks, some quizzes, some experiential methods, whatever. But she has to ensure that the child is fixated onto the topic before the topic is taken up. Second, your interest, your aptitude, obviously is going to matter the most. When you have to be judged on the basis of your intelligence and thereby secure admission for yourself in business. If I go for an entrance test, let's say, I am not interested in, I do not have the aptitude for it. I am more into accountancy, let's say, and I'm sitting for an entrance test of economics. No interest, no aptitude. What will I do? I will fail. On the other hand, I go for something in the field of accountancy and I know I want to pursue that field. My result, my learning and my outcome will be certainly better. The third implication of Thorndike's theory is that after learning anything, there has to be a good amount of revision, good amount of practice, good amount of drilling that needs to be taken, so that the teacher can be sure that whatever has been taught in the class is retained in the mind of the children. Unless and until that is taken place, and if the teacher shifts to a new topic altogether, she should be ready that the child is going to forget it. The more the drills, it does not matter that the teacher is simply giving tests and assessing them, conducting quizzes and everything, and is sure that the child will, perform very fairly. No. She has to take a continuous follow-up as well. If a child has not scored well, what is the reason behind it? The child needs to be motivated. The teacher maybe will have to pay some extra focus on that child, and only then can she expect everyone to do that. Bad habits that we inculcate can be eliminated if we disuse them. We have talked about it. Bad habits are temporary in nature. They are not a permanent change. They are not a part of our learning. We can discard them, we can disuse them, we can forget them if we want. So, next, his theory said that rewards are going to accentuate the teaching and the learning process. If you offer a better reward, if you display the right amount of behavior to your children, if you praise them, you love them, you appreciate them, you can always expect the children to perform better. And the last implication that he has is that success leads to further success. According to him, if you want to motivate a child, give him good grades, give him good marks in, let's say, the first periodic cycle, in the first month, second month, third month. The child will have that confidence in himself, and this confidence is going to lead him further. When he is sure that he has successfully completed his first month, second month, third month, that success rate is going to motivate the child to perform better in the next cycles. So these are the educational implications of Thorndike's theory. Now, let us talk about the evaluation. Obviously, if Thorndike came up with a theory, it would have been evaluated by the experts also, whether it was good, bad, the loopholes, the positives out of it. So this trial and error theory that we have learned, it stated that learning depends on a lot of things. The bond or the connection that the stimuli has with the motive of achieving it. Not just practicing something or repeating something does not mean it is going to ensure you are learning. Reward is very important. You should never punish the children. It is going to demotivate them and weaken the connection that they have. Forgetting also is something that is very easy when we talk about the temporary behavior such as drugs or fatigue. The role of learning, the problem with Thorndike's theory is that the role of learning is there, but the level of understanding that is required when learning is missing. The entire, information, the discussion that we had over Thorndike's trial and error, nowhere did we come across the word understanding. It was only learning and learning and learning. But if we learn without understanding, that is obviously of no use. And that was one of the negatives of this theory. The theory also talks about the satisfaction that one gets, and when one gets satisfaction due to some act, one stamps it. Stamps in means one keeps that in one's mind and wishes to repeat it again and again, hoping that it is going to give them success every time. Again, there are three reasons why his theory is important. First was the law of effect. It says that one needs to be motivated well, one needs to be offered better rewards if you want good learning to take place. Second, one has to identify, or rather if I say one has to move from simple to complex. If one has to grade somebody, you always have to keep things simpler in the first few months and then move to the complex part. Your teacher is going to be lenient with you when you go to class 12th in the beginning, but then gradually the checking is going to become stricter and stricter. This is what he emphasized upon. And again, this theory emphasized upon the experimental verification. One has to continue to experiment new things because with every experiment there is going to be a new. So with this, my dear students, we come to the end of the Thorndike's theory. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Pavlov's theory, which is known as the classical conditioning theory. Now, before we learn about Pavlov's theory, it is important for us to know who Pavlov was. So, Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was a Russian psychophysiologist, and he was known for his work in classical conditioning, which was the theory that he gave. Now, since his childhood, Pavlov demonstrated, he showcased a lot of curiosity along with energy. And that is what inspired him to come up with new ideas. Now, Pisarev, who was one of the most eminent, important Russian literary critics of 1860s, and I.M. Zakhanov, who was the father of Russian physiology, they were spreading, they were expanding, they were extending their power. And Pavlov, he just altogether left his religious career and he devoted his life to science. In 1870, he enrolled himself, he got himself admitted in the physics and the mathematics department at the University of St. Petersburg so that he could study natural science. He won the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine in 1904. And he became the first Russian Nobel laureate. There was a survey in the Review of General Psychology which was published in 2002 which ranked Pavlov as the 24th most cited psychologist of the 20th century. Now let us talk about the classical conditioning theory. So Pavlov gave up theory of classical conditioning and the principles of this theory. They are followed and they are spread across a lot of behavioral therapies, are used in experiments, in clinical settings, in education, as well as they help in reducing the phobias and the fears in people. So this is how his theory ended up, helping people. Now, classical conditioning is applied to the experiments performed by the Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov. And how did he practice, or how did he come up with the theory of classical conditioning? By using a sounding bell at the same time the food was presented to a hungry dog. Now, what did he do? He noticed that when a dog was offered food, the dog salivated. Salivated means, the saliva of the dog fell down because he was greedy and he wanted to eat that food, so the dog salivated. He continued to do it. Then what did he do? He combined it with the usage of a bell. So he first offered just the food to the dog, and he saw that the dog salivated because he wanted to eat it. Then he just rang the bell. And when he simply rang the bell, he saw that the dog did not react because that bell did not mean anything to him. Next, he combined the bell and food together. He rang the bell and immediately produced food in front of the dog. The dog salivated, and repeatedly the bell was rang, the food was offered. The bell was rang, the food was offered. What happened? The dog got conditioned in such a manner that whenever the bell will ring, food is going to be offered to him, and he started salivating. And there came a time when only the bell was rang again. No food was offered, but still the dog salivated. So what does it mean? This is what the theory of conditioning is. Now, since this theory is different from the theory which was, initiated by the other psychologists, therefore this theory is known as classical conditioning theory. So, as we told you that there was a time when just the bell sound made the dog salivate. Why did this happen? Because now the stimuli and the response were totally associated with each other. The dog knew that the ringing of the bell means offering of the food. This is the picture that I talked about. I am going to zoom it a bit so that you are able to understand it. Now, if you see in the first picture, before there was any conditioning, food which was unconditioned stimulus, because no conditioning was kept. Food was offered to the dog. And what was the unconditioned response? The dog salivated. Okay, no conditioning is applied. Food was given to the dog and the dog salivated. This was unconditioned response of the dog. Second, before conditioning again, bell was rung. This was a neutral stimulus. Neutral stimulus means this did not have any effect on the dog because no salivation. So again, there is no conditioned response. We could not see the dog responding in any manner. Now comes during conditioning. When conditioning was applied, what happened? The bell was rung and the food was offered to the dog. So the bell along with the food led to the salivation of the dog. This also was unconditioned. Why unconditioned? Because right now the conditioning is taking place. The dog is being trained in that manner. Okay. After the conditioning was completed, even the ringing of the bell made the dog salivate. So this is the conditioned stimulus. What is the condition? Just the ringing of the bell. And what is the conditioned response? The salivation. So, before conditioning, food was offered to the dog and the dog salivated. Both of them were unconditioned. Offering the food was unconditioned stimulus and the salivation of the dog was unconditioned response. Because obviously there was no conditioning applied. Again, ringing of the bell was neutral because the dog did not react, the dog did not salivate, showed no response at all. Now we started applying conditioning in this situation. And what did we do? We rang the bell together, offered the food to the dog, and the dog salivated. Right now, the conditioning is in process, and therefore the salivation, the response of the dog is again unconditioned in nature. That is not something which has been conditioned. But after the conditioning is complete, just the ringing of the bell led to the salivation of the dog. Now the conditioning is complete, so my ringing of the bell is conditioned stimulus, and the salivation of the dog is conditioned response. This was the theory laid forward by Pavlov. So what were the components that we learned from the table, from the dog and the box above? Unconditional stimulus. The presentation of the food was unconditional. Unconditional response was the dog salivated on seeing the food. Neutral stimulus was the ringing of the bell, was the neutral stimulus. And then obviously the bell and the food offered to the dog together. Conditioned stimulus was just when the bell was rung, and the conditioned response was the salivation of the dog on hearing the bell. Now, stimulus, what does it mean? As I have told you, the starting of something, and response means the end of it. Stimulus elicits and response is elicited. Means stimulus is something which forces you to act in one manner, and the reaction that you give to that is your response. Okay? Unconditioned means something which is unlearned, something which is untaught, something which existed already, that is unconditioned. So the dog salivating on seeing the food was unconditioned because that is something which was inbuilt into them. And conditioning or the conditioned was exactly the opposite. When this connection, the bond, the changes were brought over because of something new, something external which was applied to it. So, the conditioned response, the relationship can be explained with the help of the continuity of stimuli. What were the two stimuli that we talked about? The ringing of the bell and the food. They had to be timed in such a manner that one took place immediately after the other, so that the dog got to know that the moment the bell rang, the food will be offered. So the dog got motivated on the ringing of the bell, and since it took place a number of times, the dog got habit of it. This repetition meant the association between the sound of the bell and the dog was established, and that is why one could get the outcome of that. Now, this was Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. Let us now look at the educational implications. How does the classical conditioning theory help in the education of us? First, when a child is taught about new words with the help of pictures or with the help of its meaning, that is classical conditioning. You show the child a picture of a cow again and again and tell her, this is a cow, this is a cow, this is a cow. The next time you bring that picture in front of the child, she'll be able to identify it. It can be used to develop a good attitude, towards learning, towards the teachers, towards the subject, as well as the school. If the child is again and again exposed to a pleasant environment, a good teaching method in the school, the child will get habitual of it and will develop a favorable attitude towards them. It will help one to develop good habits also. When a child is repeatedly told, or rather watches you cleaning things around, keeping things in order, picking up the newspaper, keeping it in the right place, the child will see and learn and practice it himself or herself. And again, the bad habits, and if there is some fear that the child is going through, that can be eliminated. How? When we weaken them the condition that will get discarded and eliminated from the child's mind. So this was the classical conditioning theory by Pavlov. Now, let us evaluate. How was Pavlov's theory evaluated? This theory talked about learning due to the formation of a habit or an automatic behavior when certain skills or certain stimulations were offered repeatedly, right? One can get rid of multiple fears, phobias, and some sort of prejudices after a conditioning process. If a child is exposed to a pleasant situation and something that the child or a person is scared of is brought together in a good situation, the fear that one has from that is going to get reduced. Next, these can be reflected by the stimulus. Obviously, if you have an unpleasant experience, that is going to reflect in how you respond to that. As I said, because of deconditioning, the fears that we have in oneself are going to get deeper day by day, and there would be a day when all of it is going to get evaporated. Now, stimulus and the response, when they are associated wonderfully well, then we can expect that the stimulus is going to have an impact that is expected. Only when the bell and the food was presented together in front of the dog did we make a dog salivate only on the sound of a bell. Without it, that reinforcement, that change was not possible as well. Therefore, a teacher also should not just punish the child for something, for some unwanted behavior, but should also, motivate, reward, or praise the same child for something good that he or she has done. What will happen? The child is going to get more keen and more inclined towards the good things because he will know that if I do good, I'm going to get a reward. And is going to take a back step from all the unwanted responses. The child, if you come across a child who does not do his homework, but he gives the correct answer, you are not supposed to scold the child for not doing the homework, but appreciate him for giving the correct answer. Because this is going to motivate him in order to give a correct answer every time a question is put. So this was the evaluation of the classical conditioning So with this, my dear students, we've come to the end of classical conditioning theory. I'm going to pause here now, and in my next lecture, I will discuss with you Skinner's operant conditioning theory.